Coming up on First at 4, today marks 25 years since a Lexington teenager vanished without a trace. Plus, we find out what is motivating voters ahead of the midterm elections in November.
And after some record-setting temperatures earlier this week, we've got a taste of spring heading our way. Details on the roller coaster coming up as First at 4 continues.
Mountain News First at 4 continues.
It's been a mystery for 25 years. A teenager was last seen in October of 1997. Lydia Perkins was 14 when her family says she disappeared. WYMP's Phil Penderman spoke to her family about a case with many questions but few answers.
25 years ago today, a family came home to find one of their kids missing, 14-year-old Lydia Perkins. To this date, there's still no sign of what took place with her and why all of this happened.
She's still in my heart. She's in my everyday thoughts.
Sherry Thompson says on October 19th, 1997, her daughter had just arrived home from her grandparents when later that day she could not be found. Police were called, a search was conducted, but there's been no sign of her since. DNA tests were conducted. There's been jailhouse and prison inmate confessions from people who claim they killed her, but none of those have been verified.
There's a heartbreak in your heart that never goes away, and it never goes away. You know, there's not a day that don't go by that I don't think of my daughter, and your heart just breaks.
Lexington police say this is still a very active and open investigation. They say they do have detectives assigned specifically to look into these cold cases. Right now, they want to look and see if there's any recent advancements in technology that would assist them in this case. In Lexington, Phil Pendleton, now back to you.
Lydia Perkins's birthday is in December, and her family says she would have turned 40 then if she was found alive. Another Kentucky county is participating in a rural road study aimed at keeping drivers safe. The High Five Project selected 5 counties in Kentucky for a year-long seatbelt education, enforcement, and engineering program. Buckling your seatbelt is something that everyone should do the moment they first get in their car, but that's not the case for everyone.
But I believe it's in the high 80s, and so that means at least 12–13% or more are unbelted at any given time. That number goes up in rural counties.
Madison County is one of 5 counties in Kentucky where this program is happening. The program is centered around dropping the number of fatal crashes by encouraging drivers to wear their seatbelt.
Well, it is another sunny afternoon, or at least we've welcomed the sun back in after a rather chilly day yesterday. It's still cool out there, but we're bringing back some nicer air as well. A look outside from downtown Whitesburg at this hour. It is quiet as folks, the hustle and the bustle of a work day on the end, or finishing up out there, and you see blue skies above, plenty of sunshine. That's helped get temperatures up into the low to middle 50s for most of us. That's even breaking what many of us thought the high was going to be today. We've seen more sunshine, more winds out of the west. That's helped boost those temperatures. A little cooler in the Big Sandy. A few clouds left over from that system earlier this week that continues to push up the northeast coast, so nothing we have to worry about. And into tonight, though, it's still cold. Everybody's under a freeze warning again overnight through early tomorrow morning, down into the low 30s for an overnight low with clear skies and calm winds. Now, coming up in a little bit, the latest on when we can see a return to some warmer air. That's in a few minutes. Steve?
All right, thank you very much, Evan. Well, just less than 3 weeks to the midterms, and early voting is already drawing some record crowds. A new Associated Press poll found nearly 3/4 of voters said they think the future of the country will be at stake when they vote this year. As CBS's Natalie Brand explains, some key groups could influence the outcomes.
Voters are already making their voices heard with urgency.
This is a pretty crucial election, and the sooner I make my voice heard, the better.
Georgia is seeing record turnout for early midterms voting. Some people waiting in line for 40 minutes outside this library.
I expected it to be busy, maybe not quite this busy.
CBS News pollsters identified 4 groups of voters that could all influence results this November, from parents to sought-after young people.
They're not the largest group in the electorate, but they could really matter if they show up.
A new poll by the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU Law found the majority of voters are confident the midterms will be conducted fairly with reliable results. But there's fallout in Florida after newly released video shows confusion over arrests in August as part of Governor Ron DeSantis' new Office of Election Crimes and Security.
Voter fraud.
The individuals are accused of violating a state law that does not allow people convicted of murder or felony sex offenses to vote following completion of their sentences. Florida law did restore voting rights to other felons. The people arrested in the video expressed confusion over why they were allowed to register to vote in the first place.
It's a mistake that appears to be made primarily by the state.
A new statement from Florida's Secretary of State says in part the ultimate responsibility to ensure compliance with the law lies with the voter. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
If convicted of voter fraud, those defendants could be returned to prison for up to 5 years. As we continue to approach the midterms, another big talking point is the money flowing in. The two major political parties continue to go at each other pound for pound in this election cycle in terms of fundraising and spending. The Federal Election Commission says through the end of the 2018 midterm cycle, less than $6 billion were spent, but through the end of September this year, we've already hit more than that number with weeks to go.
Got to elect Republicans up and down the ballot in order to restore our country.
Joe Biden talks about this as a battle for the soul of the nation, and I take that very seriously. We're not going to unilaterally disarm in that.
Spending is expected to ramp up even more as Election Day nears. Open Secrets, a research and government transparency group that tracks money in politics, predicts it will be to the tune of $9.3 billion. The January 6th committee voted to subpoena former President Donald Trump, but how much will their actions matter in the coming midterm elections? Pollsters say even though the issue of January 6th is not a huge deal on the minds of most voters, it does matter to some. In an expected tight election season, that could be the difference in key races. George Washington professor Todd Belt says polling shows the topic helps Democrats, but not as much as you would think.
I think it is a positive impact for Democrats, but I think it is at the margins.
Siena College, which conducts polls with the New York Times, says they are not polling for January 6th specifically, but have asked voters if they believe democracy is in question. Don Levy, who is the director of the Siena Research Institute, says more than 70% of members in each party believe so. The Treasury Department says it will assess how extreme weather increases insurance rates. Officials say they are taking a hard look at how climate-related disasters are driving rates. The Federal Insurance Office is requesting zip code level data from insurance companies regarding policies and prices. This is the first time the department has used its authority to ask insurance companies for that type of data. Even before Hurricane Ian slammed into Florida, homeowners in the state were paying 3 times the national average for their insurance premiums, about $4,200 a year compared to the national average of $1,500. Cool weather is forcing leaves off the trees, and here in eastern Kentucky, maybe a little earlier this year, which means many of you probably have piles of them in your yard. Well, it's that time of the year when many of us do not like to rake the yard, and science says you don't have to. Chopping leaves up with a lawnmower, for instance, can be beneficial in a few ways.
It creates moisture. It creates an organic material injection of nutrients, and then it creates a barrier to keep the grass warm through the freeze-thaw cycle as we go into winter.
Leaving some leaves in your yard can also benefit backyard critters such as insects, salamanders, and frogs, which use the leaves as a habitat. Coming up as First at 4 continues, if you paid baggage fees with American Airlines in the last several years, you may qualify for a refund.
Plus, sunshine with us this afternoon. We'll see how long that lasts and when we can boost that number above my head back up as it goes down. Coming up.